Welcome to Veteran Voices, a podcast dedicated to giving a voice to those that have served in our country's armed forces. On this series, we sit down with a wide variety of veterans and veteran advocates to gain their insights, perspective, and experiences. We'll talk with many individuals about their challenging transition from active duty to the private sector, and we'll discuss some of the most vital issues facing veterans today. Join us for this episode of Veteran Voices. All right, so I want to welcome in our featured guests here today on Veteran Voices, Aaron Freed, warehouse slotting analyst with McKesson and U.S. Army Reserve Logistics Officer. I'd add a third one, incredible live stream subject matter expert. So Aaron, good afternoon. How you doing?
Afternoon, Scott. I'm doing pretty awesome. Thank you for that. I really like the live feeds. It's something I just bring up on my iPad while I'm sitting here doing warehouse analysis. And I can just pop over, do a little type in, answer a response, see how things are going. So it keeps me, gives me a little something to do in the background.
That's why we do it. We really enjoyed your contributions and the conversations that come out of those. So really appreciate that. And it is nice in this day and age as we're working fast and furiously, emails and phone calls and problems across supply chain and other parts of the business world to kind of have a little friendly banner in the background, right?
It is. It's you get a little bit of that from the office, and I still get that with the occasional Teams chat, text back and forth, but you just don't have that constant interaction. So it's nice to have that bit of banter back and forth and actually feel, that interpersonal connection.
Outstanding. I agree with you. Kindred spirits there. So let's, for the sake of this interview here, I'm really excited. Appreciate your time. Been looking forward to this. Let's start out with the basics. So tell us where you're from, and you got to give us an anecdote or two about your upbringing.
Okay. I grew up in Ventura County. It's a suburb just north of, it's just north of Los Angeles. So I was a bit of a Dodgers fan growing up, but I have since lost touch with sports. But of course, today, is a good day to be from LA.
Right. And let's fill in for the three listeners that may not be aware. The Dodgers just won the World Series for the first time, I think, since, 86, 88 maybe?
According to one of my friends on Facebook, I think a 32-year slump. His 32-year wait is now over, and he's not even 40, so he's been waiting most of his life.
So congrats to the Dodgers fans in our audience. But you grew up, you said in North LA, is that right?
It's so Ventura is north of LA, about 30 minutes to an hour, depending upon how traffic on the 405 and the 101 goes. So it's kind of between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara.
So when you look back and think of growing up in that beautiful part of the country, what's a couple things that you miss to this day?
In-N-Out. I still miss In-N-Out. Every time I came home from leave, the first thing that my parents and brother knew to do was, we're stopping at In-N-Out because Aaron needs his double-double, as if there's just no substitute.
I've heard a lot from folks I know from the West Coast and from California that's the first thing they get when they go back too. So it must be a big thing.
First time I'd really gone home, I was actually mid-tour leave on my deployment to Iraq. I was brand new second lieutenant, and that was just like, I've been in uniform, haven't slept or showered or anything in maybe about 48 hours because it takes a while to fly back. And I just I need In-N-Out. I need a hamburger. I need a good hamburger. So that just kind of started the tradition. So when I go back, that's what we do, In-N-Out.
Love it. Love it. All right. So beyond getting your burger fix, when you think of your childhood, what else really sticks out?
Honestly, my parents, they were a huge influence on me. My mom is a retired nurse and worked in pediatrics. My dad was a city planner for the city of Simi Valley. And they really had a huge impact on who I am today because of what they did. That's kind of why I do what I do. I really got that sense of service, of helping people, thinking about your community. And that has stuck with me really my whole life. It's one of the reasons I went into the military. It's one of the reasons I've stayed working in supply chain, and why I'm so proud to be on the McKesson team, because it's great to work for a company that's not just making money, but it's actually doing something that is giving back.
I love your answer to that. So let's go to a step further, because the next question I had for you is, what did make you join the military? Why did you join the military? I think you've given us a big chunk of the answer, but is there anything else that you really point to?
I'm Jewish and my family are immigrants. We came to America over a couple generations just looking for that opportunity for being safe, for being, not in a place that doesn't like you. So I really wanted to kind of give back to my country, because we've had a very good life. I got to live that sweet middle upper class, suburb lifestyle and all the wonderful privilege that comes with it. And I wanted to cash in some of that privilege and give back. So the military, government service, it seemed to me like a good fit. And so that was the plan. Originally, I was actually going to use the military as a stepping stone into law enforcement. But after the first couple of days of ROTC at San Diego State, I knew, no, this is what I'm doing. This is my career. I'm sticking this out.
Let's continue on that path, college and ROTC, and how you got your commission. And then we'll go more into what you did on active duty. So tell us more about that.
I went to college originally actually intending to be a Marine, and then my roommate freshman year was a Marine. So I decided to go to the Army. I just wanted to, I loved it. It was great. Originally, I tried to be a computer engineer, but calculus is super hard at 7 in the morning. So I switched to a slightly easier major after a couple of years, criminal justice. Turns out, instead of being up till 3 in the morning writing code, I literally could study for my final by watching Law and Order. So
nice trade-off, right?
Nice trade-off. Definitely took some stress out of the picture. And, college was just a great experience. I loved it. I met so many wonderful people I'm still in touch with today from ROTC, and it really helped shape me. I didn't actually ever intend to be in supply chain. I wanted to be a tank commander. I wanted to be an armor officer, but turns out not so doing well in calculus meant I became needs of the Army. And so heartbroken me, I was assigned a role as a transportation officer. And my ROTC instructor, who was an armor officer, consoled me and said, Aaron, it's just like being in a tank, only there's no armor and there's no guns. And honestly, if I'd been a logistics officer, I'd be retired right now with a 6-figure job.
What could have been? But you're having so much fun on this current journey, right?
The best thing that could ever happen to me was not getting what I wanted, but getting what I needed. That trying to always stay positive, stay flexible, semper gumby, it's my motto. That is logistics. That is supply chain. It's what you do, is you've always got to be prepared, adaptable, flexible. It's what we keep talking about in the live streams. Is anything can happen at any moment. So I just kept staying flexible. And I went off to Germany after commissioning, sold my soul for 3 years. I was going to give it to him anyway, so got something in return.
So when did you graduate? What year was that?
I graduated in 2008.
Okay, 2008, and then went to Germany on active duty as an Army officer, commissioned officer, and spent 3 years there?
3 years, give or take a deployment to Iraq. I showed up, and literally 40 days exactly, I was downrange in Kuwait with my company. I showed up, we were a truck company, driving tractor trailers. So the M915, which is basically just a giant Oshkosh trailer or tractor painted green with armor slapped on the sides. That's what we drove. We did a lot of 40-foot trailer hauling, moving stuff up and down route. What's Highway 1, we called it MSR Tampa, Main Supply Route Tampa, just up and down from Baghdad down to the Kuwaiti border, moving stuff as part of the retrograde in 2009. Thankfully, it was an incredibly safe deployment. Never shot at, never blown up. Everyone came home. I think the only injury we had was someone got hurt playing basketball.
Thankfully, and really appreciate your combat deployment, because those are some dangerous parts of the world, as we all know. Let's talk about one of my favorite questions in these interviews is favorite people. And think about, folks that either worked for you or folks that were your peers, or maybe some leaders you worked for that really had a big impact on not just your time served, but as you've already alluded to, some of your lessons learned that apply to, more broadly to your life experiences and global view.
That is always the big one. And I can just start listing the names of practically everyone I've worked with. I've had the honor and pleasure of serving alongside hundreds, thousands of people, great men and women who were the enlisted folks that did the actual jobs, the NCOs who mentored me, advised me, supervised the soldiers, fellow officers, peers and superiors, and even eventually subordinates as I rose up, who have made a huge impact. Everyone I've come across has left their mark on me, just like I've hopefully left a better mark on them. First person I really want to talk about, though, is my close friend, Hunter Berg. He's now Major Berg. He's still on active duty. I think he'll be up for Lieutenant Colonel in a few years, and I'm pretty sure he's going to get it because he's just one of those kinds of people who keep succeeding. He was my company commander after coming back from Iraq, and I was his executive officer. So we worked hand in hand along with the company First Sergeant Kermit Joseph to make things happen. And we very quickly became fast friends. Hunter's the person who really taught me about the importance of people. It's not just enough to be smart. It's not just enough to know the manuals inside and out, to know all the technical stuff. It's people. You can't get things done without people. And he was tough, gruff. He was all about discipline, hard training. Like, he worked that company so hard. We went from doing 0 truck missions back in Germany a week, 0. We weren't doing anything. And he was pushing to have us pull 22 missions a week, which was and within a few months, we were getting it. He was just going around, knocking on doors. Hey, give me missions, give me jobs. I want my truck drivers driving trucks because that's the best training is doing. And even though suddenly we're doing all this maintenance, we're going to the field, we're doing training, we're running missions, people are away from their, spouses, their kids, everyone was happy because he knew them and he kept them busy and gave them what they needed without just not giving them what they wanted. And so even though he was this, tough disciplinarian, everyone loved him. One of the most amazing officers I've ever had the privilege to work with. So glad I get to call him friend. We still chat on the phone periodically, message on Facebook and stuff back and forth. But Hunter is honestly one of the most impactful people in my life from my career.
Well, so that is currently Major Berg. You mentioned that he is up for Lieutenant Colonel around the corner. Good luck, Major Berg. If you're listening to this, that's awesome. And the relationship that endures, I really love that. Who else comes to mind?
Another person who's had a big impact, probably doesn't realize it, but is Colonel retired, Rob Campbell. And the reason I bring him up is because I was one of his company commanders. He was the brigade commander, so I was 2 levels below him. He commanded the battalions who yelled at me, and I was the support company commander for the Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron, 132 Bandits, Elvis's unit.
Really?
Yep, Elvis's unit, 132 Cav. There are pictures of Elvis all over the squadron HQ.
That's awesome. Love that.
And so he brought all of his commanders in to do this leadership growth thing. I don't know if the video can see it.
Yep.
True growth, a bunch of senior, retired colonels and generals to talk to us about leadership and being an authentic leader. And one of the things that's on this card is my core purpose, which is what defines my core values, which helps shape my leadership behaviors. And my core purpose is to do the right thing, improve the lives of others, and embody tikkun olam, which is a principle from Judaism about healing the world and restoring the world. Being able to take time, sit down, put that on paper, and then he made us carry these cards with us. And 8 years later, I'm still carrying the card with me. Even though he's retired, I'm out of the unit, I'm out of the active Army. That meant a lot because it allowed me to really focus on what Simon Sinek talks about, the why.
Right.
To your why. Why do you do? Well, I want to do the right thing and make lives better. So that's why I work the way I work, and it's why I do what I do. Love
that. I bet you've just made Colonel Rob Campbell's day to have something stick with someone that worked for you or for him. That's so meaningful, and clearly it's words to live by. And I didn't, what was that phrase you shared about healing the world?
Tikkun olam.
Okay, tikkun olam.
Tikkun, Tikkun, OLAM. AM.
All right, I'm going to have to give my son and my daughters a similar card. That really inspirational. I appreciate you sharing that. Beyond Major Berg and retired Colonel Campbell, who else sticks out?
There's been a lot of people. I've got a list right here, and I'm just trying to pick who to talk about. I've worked with a lot of amazing people. Probably the next person I want to talk about would be now Colonel retired, Joseph Power IV, who was my boss's boss in Kuwait much later in my career. I was the Installation Transportation Officer, the ITO, and he was the brigade commander for Area Support Group Kuwait. Basically, he ran the base. He was the installation commander responsible for all the contracts, all the life support, so the dining facilities, base security, the MPs, the morale welfare programs, anything that was installation related, that was him. He ran a small city, and now he runs a bunch of stuff for Amazon.
Really?
Yep. He is a senior operations manager for Amazon, and he really empowered his subordinates to go out there and do the right thing, because that's what he embodied, was every day, look, what are the rules? If that's the rules, then those are the rules. I don't care about, making people happy. I do care about making people happy, but I also care about doing it ethically. We're not going to break the rules. We're not going to commit fraud, waste, and abuse. We're going to spend taxpayer money smart. As the ITO, I oversaw all the transportation stuff, which meant all the leased vehicles, and there's a good 1,200 vehicles we lease each year to support getting around on and off post, because the Kuwaitis generally do not like us driving around with Humvees. It's kind of disconcerting to their population, but, leased SUVs, totally good.
It's interesting you shared that. I spent a little bit of time, 45-day TDY at Al Jabar Air Base, not too far from Kuwait City.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking about it. I never really connected the dots, because our SPs, our security teams, some of the officers, they would all drive not Land Rovers, but something similar rather than any military vehicle.
What did we have? I'm trying to remember. It was all the car names are bouncing around my head. It was
like an Isuzu, well, whatever it is.
Yeah.
To your point, it was
big SUV.
Yes, it was an SUV. And I never really understood and connected the dots why, but now I guess you're filling in the dots, 18 years later.
Yep.
It was a community outreach initiative, perhaps.
Yep. It was a big part of how we maintain good relations with the Kuwaiti government and people is by being respectful of them and, continuing to build off that, trust. But to that tune, it was also a very expensive thing, because they weren't cheap. Leasing a vehicle is not cheap, especially when the people providing it know you've got deep government pockets. And
right.
So making sure that we only got, say, 1,200 instead of 2,000 vehicles, we want to make sure that we have enough, but not too many, so we're not wasting money. And everyone wanted a car. Everyone wanted to be able to drive around. And I was the person they had to go through. And I said a lot of no, because that's just the way it works.
What you got to do as ITO, you got to say no.
Sometimes being a leader means saying no, and being able to go, we don't need this. You don't need this. You may want this. Needs are not wants. Just because you're a lieutenant colonel or a sergeant major doesn't mean you get a car.
Right.
You get to use your feet just like everyone else.
Chevrolet legs, as a dear friend of mine in the military once called it. Highland Wong. Hopefully you're doing well, Highland. So I know there's a few other folks we want to recognize. I want to give you the opposite version of this question, but I want to make sure who else when you look back you really had some special experiences with.
My first platoon sergeant, Sergeant First Class Cheryl Taylor. My motor sergeant, Truck, I still call him Truck, Sergeant First Class Robert Parrish. My second platoon sergeant, Sergeant First Class Dale Spinagle.
Tons, right? Hundreds.
I'm just basically listing all the people I worked with. The fellow lieutenants I worked with, now Major Abigail Gage, Major Sean Donahoe, now out Captain Kent Robbins, great guy, from a completely opposite life from me. Grew up, cow punching out in the eastern part of Washington, and very different from me in every single way, but we're still close friends.
So let me throw not a curveball, but a little bit of we'll call it a splitter.
Sure.
Not only do we learn so much from the best leaders we work with, the best team members we work with, but the salt of the earth people that you just listed, a lot of those folks that made a huge positive impact in your life. But without naming names, I think we've all worked for some really, let's just say, not ideal folks, maybe that weren't meant to supervise or lead or even manage. And those have been, at least in my journey, some really powerful lessons learned. Again, without naming names, is there a lesson or an individual or an experience that comes to mind along those lines that you learned something big from?
Absolutely. I've worked with people who sometimes they weren't the right leader for me. Sometimes they weren't the right leader for that position. People who should not have really been in a company command position, people who were in command too long and just needed to not do that anymore. And even myself, I've had screw ups. I was an okay company commander. I was not great. I was not spectacular. I am a small teams kind of guy. I am, surround me with maybe 5-6 people and we work together. I'm amazing. Tell me, hey, here's 70 folks, run it. That's not my bag. That's not my expertise. That's not where I shine. And that's what I had to do. I was adequate, and I own and accept that shortcoming because it's the only way to learn from that, to grow and better know who I am and where I should be doing and help others find out what they're doing.
I really appreciate that. It takes a very experienced, confident, honest, transparent, and authentic person to share what you just shared. And those are the type of people that we want to work with and build with and do stuff with, because it allows you to move faster, because we're all not built. I mean, I wish I was built to be a NFL quarterback, with the golden arm and all that stuff, be able to lead, 11 folks or 10 other folks into battle, play in and play out. Yeah. That wasn't, unfortunately, in my DNA. And, to lead 70 or 700, I mean, we're all meant to do certain different things. And I really appreciate what you shared. Let's talk about accomplishments, though, because just already hearing you share some of your tidbits, different components of your career, different stops, different things you're responsible for, different roles, y'all still got a ton done, especially during a really challenging time. It still is challenging to be in the military. It seems like we've been at war and in conflict for forever. When you look back, though, Aaron, and look back at what you and your colleagues and your team got accomplished, what are you most proud of?
Most proud of was probably the position I enjoyed the most was as the ITO in Kuwait, because I was given trust, given a great team to work with of civilians and military and contractors, and I enjoyed it because I got to actually be technically, smart. I got to be sometimes the smartest guy in the room, which I don't like it because, Pat, I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room because then I'm in the wrong room, but I got to. And find out, okay, I might actually be the smartest person in the room, then I'm going to use that. And I'm very proud of what we did because we actually helped to reduce some of those contract costs by $600,000 annually, taxpayer money, by implementing data-driven decision-making, which analyze the utilization rate of vehicles across the entire fleet to come up with actual specific recommendations for what gets cut, who needs an extra vehicle added, rather than what they'd been doing for well over a decade was some general up high says, I don't know, we're spending too much money, cut it in half. Why? Because it feels right. And then a board of colonels sitting there going, I don't know, you don't need a vehicle. Why? I'm a colonel, feels right. And, intuition, gut feeling takes you only so far. And being able to hand a bunch of spreadsheets and graphs and charts to those panel of colonels and go, well, we need to cut these 10 vehicles because they get driven 100 kilometers and they should be driven, 10,000 miles is what we're really looking for each year. They didn't go anywhere. We're wasting money. And they can look at me and go, yeah, do it. That's one of the things I am most proud of was revising an entire system that I know was still being used the next year because my replacement called me from Kuwait while I was back stateside to talk to me about it.
That's just like goes back to the card that you got from Colonel Campbell. It's enduring. It works so well. It still means something to you. So for your successor to be using a system that y'all created and were so successful with.
36-page how-to book because I had just completed a master's degree in supply chain and app management. So I had all these analysis tools under my belt that I'm still using today that I knew most people didn't. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to assume everyone else here knows how to calculate a standard deviation, let alone do that in Excel and build these, pivot tables. I'm going to write a 36-page how-to manual of walking you through step by step, so you don't need to know anything about math. Just do the things, and it'll work out fine.
Love that. A continuity manual is what we called those when I was active duty.
Yep. Continuity book.
Yes, there you go. I hated typing those things up. Man, mine wasn't nearly as complicated as yours was, but nevertheless. So now I want to switch gears. You're still a reserve in the U.S. Army Reserve, so you're still serving. We really appreciate that. Let's talk about your transition from active duty into your first role. Talk about that. What was that experience like?
So that was a pretty interesting experience. I left active duty actually being involuntarily separated. I didn't get picked up for major on active duty. I got my 3 looks and then by law had to be separated, though I kind of engineered that a little bit. I didn't think I was going to get it if I actually tried. I ran the numbers. That's what I do. And going into like, well, I've got maybe a 10% chance of getting picked up if I can't get this excellent eval. I'm just coming off a year in Kuwait. I haven't seen my wife in a year. I kind of really want to spend time with her and not be at the office late. And I was taking an instructor role that was incredibly rewarding, the most rewarding position. I loved being the ITO in Kuwait, but it was the most rewarding experience being an instructor. And I was like, I really don't want to kill myself at this job, which is supposed to be a bit more of a take a knee type thing to try and get that evaluation that might improve my odds from 10% up to, 30%. So I'm just going to plan that I'm getting out. But I also had some friends who steered me in the right direction, said, don't put in paperwork to ask to leave. Make them kick you out because you'll get severance. And I went, well, no one told me that. Most people don't tell you that. If you get forcibly separated for, honorable service, they're going to hand you a big old check and say, thank you and have a nice day. So I told my bosses, this is my plan. And I had excellent leaders who worked with me. Major, now Lieutenant Colonel Sanchez, and Mr. Keith Fagler, who's the civilian director for the department. They supported me 100% and gave me an amazing write-up in evaluations so that when I went to my civilian employers, they would look at it and go, wow, you look great, because they're not going to know the difference between most qualified and highly qualified. They don't care about, this little checkmark box. They want to see the big fancy words. So I kind of engineered my own demise, but they supported me in that separation. And the big part about that transition was I thought I was going to be okay, that it was going to be nice, smooth sailing, and it really wasn't. Even though I started almost like 6-7 months in advance, writing my resume, starting to submit job applications, talk to people, get to a feel for what's out there, it was still a rough, rocky situation because it's a world change. I think this is what happens for every person who comes off military service and transitions is it's a complete paradigm shift. You don't even speak the same language half the time. I had to demilitarize my LinkedIn, convert and translate all of my job assignments from, no one knows what a platoon leader is. I was a truck, section junior manager, and converting all that was a huge challenge, and there's not really anyone you can reach out to immediately for that help. And that's improving. There's a lot of good organizations out there that help with that, help with resume writing, help with those situations.
Hey, Aaron, really quick for context, when did you transition?
That was July. I left active service in July 2018, 2019. I always mix that up.
But there was, to your point, there still isn't. Never has been. I know there's been different technology providers that have come up with different way. Hey, plug your MOS in here, your AFSC, and
yep.
Here's what you're quote unquote qualified to do. There's not an algorithm or an AI that you can turn your LinkedIn profile over to, and it spits out everything the way it should be for private sector consumption. And that's
it's rough.
Yeah, it is rough.
I'm actually working with my local APICS chapter on that. The president of the local chapter spoke to me about that. It's like, hey, can you talk to us about your transition? And what can we do to help the military community? Because Fort Lee, home of Army logistics, is right here. We're the supply chain folks. We want to support them. And how do we help those people? Help ourselves. Get these great leaders and supply chain folks into our businesses, our government agencies. So that's actually something I'm talking with them about. How do we build those relationships? How do we get that out there? It was a rough transition. I actually did not have a job lined up by the time I left active duty. It was very narrow. I landed something the last minute with Pepsi. They had done, one of their managers came by the separation office to do some interviews. And I walked in, pressed the crap out of him with my resume. He's like, I'm going to tell you, you're overqualified for this job. And I'm just thinking, that's fine, but do I get money for doing a thing? Because I kind of need to eat. So I did it. I signed on. I was a supervisor for Pepsi, and it was an intense 9 months with them. Fascinating experience, getting to learn a business just like that, and learning how the warehouse worked, learning how to work with people who don't instantly jump when I say now, because as you keep talking about in the live stream, in the military, everyone's all on that mission because you know that there's something at stake, people's lives. And then you're at Pepsi and you're like, it's sugar water, man. It's diabetes in a bottle. We're not exactly super thrilled and motivated. I'm here for a paycheck. And learning a lot of that and getting to apply leadership skills, incredible experience, really set me up for what I do now, because I can't really be a good warehouse slotting analyst unless I understand a warehouse. So I'm really appreciative of that opportunity with Pepsi.
We're going to talk about what you're doing now, but before we do, I want to, for our listeners that may be either experiencing a transition, they've got a transition around the corner, let's make sure that you can share some advice with them. So clearly you've already answered. One of the questions I like asking folks, was your transition more challenging than you expected? Oftentimes the answer is yes, unfortunately, despite all the newfound layers of support and folks willing to help, now versus say, 10, even 5 years ago. When you think about advice you'd give for folks that are either about the transition or they're in the thick of things,
sure.
We all want to help a lot. What's a short list of things that folks need to have in mind?
I jotted some ideas down about that. And honestly, this isn't even about people transitioning to the military, but any kind of life transition. You're going off to college for the first time or the second time or third time because you had to change jobs. Your industry's dying. There's something happening and you got to transition who you are and what you do. And the first thing comes back to this card that I carry from Rob Campbell. You have to define you. What are you passionate about? What are you good at? And then figuring out what does that look like as a career. It's taken me well over a decade to figure out I like solving problems and I like thinking smart about those problems. Well, gosh darn, turns out being a data analyst is exactly that. And it took me a decade to figure that out. I just went in like, I'm just going to tell people to drive trucks and I'm going to go fight bad guys. And it's like, so figuring out who you are and what you're passionate about, that's really what's going to set you up, because once you know what you want to do and you can find those jobs and then start backwards planning. Okay, in order to get to that point, what are the skills I need? Well, I'm going to need to be able to do A, B, C. And maybe right now this is what I do and what I know, and I can start building those gaps and figuring out how do I translate what I do now into eventually becoming that. The other thoughts are there's no such thing as too much planning or too much preparation. You can't start planning too early. I mean, sometimes you're just like, I don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now. But I do save money in retirement because I do know what's coming. I can't just start planning for retirement 5 years before retirement. I had to start planning for retirement when I got my diploma from college.
Right.
So there's no such thing as too early to plan or too much prep. I started writing my resume in the November before I was getting kicked out in July. And I went through like probably 30 revisions and was still talking to a resume writer in June because I'm like, oh, no one's biting. Something's not right here. And then finally talk to people outside your group. If you're transitioning out of the military, don't talk to people in the military. You can't talk to the people in uniform because they don't know. They don't know what's on the outside. So I started reaching out to my friends who I'd met who were in the reserves, National Guard, like, hey, you actually have to like do this whole civilian thing. How does that work? Like, what do I do? What do I need to know?
Right.
And I started connecting with people on LinkedIn, like folks like yourself, listening to supply chain podcasts to go, well, what the hell's actually happening out there in the industry? Start learning this, talking to my old professors, talking to just connections and people who I applied for with jobs and saying, well, taking apart the whole whether or not I'm even a candidate for this. What can I do better? What should I know? What advice do you have? Because people really just want to help each other out.
And some of what I heard there, a couple things, really, I hate to use the word, thinking outside the box because it's so overused. There's a lot of things when it comes to resources and things you can lean on to help make a transition easier and help find the conversations that you need to have once you've determined what you like to do, what you love to do, what's your passion and what you want to do. You're really thinking, sitting down and using sounding boards to identify that community of resources you can lean on. I think that's a great point that you're speaking to.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I think that really stands out because a good old resume. I think of my transition, and when I think of all the conversations I've had with folks transitioning, I think a lot of folks, and I'm guilty as charged here, because once I paid $250 or something to get a resume writer to do it, and then in my mind I was like, I'm good here. It's not going to change. This is what I'm going to use. But those constant tweaks as you put it out in the market, the feedback you get, or you might think of a highly leverageable skill set or experience you had 6 months after you've had your resume, or 6 weeks, add it in there. And it's a living and breathing document. I think that's a really valuable lesson for folks to learn.
First thing I did after getting hired on at Pepsi was I put it on my resume because I was like, I don't know, you never know when you might need to pull that thing out. So first thing I did is I put it on the resume. And then just a thing I picked up from the military of always kind of keeping track of your achievements for that annual evaluation report. I started doing the same thing at Pepsi, and I kept updating my resume, because then it became, well, just in case I have to hunt for a job, God forbid they close the warehouse or whatever, I've got it ready. And then when it came time to sit down and do my end of year evaluations, like, well, I've actually kept track of the things I've done.
That's so important. That is so important. So if you're listening to that, whether you want to do it the old-fashioned way and keep a nice little written journal, manual journal as you knock things out and get accomplishments, get feedback, just keeping an experience journal, or I tell you, these days with email, Aaron, you can do a save as on an Outlook email and just create a folder, and it's so easy. You don't have to print anything. It's all portable. So that's a great piece of feedback. I want to add that to some of my conversations I have. All right. So before we talk about what you're doing now in your company, you mentioned APICS, you mentioned some of your industry association leadership and volunteer leadership. That's an interesting point and valuable point, I think, for our listeners that maybe they're already started there. Maybe they successfully accomplished their transition, but now they're in their career and they're trying to move up like we all are. Associations can be a great resource as well. Speak to that for a second in your experience.
Association, just really knowing people. It's the old school network, and it's being brought into the modern age. Just knowing people, like you said, thinking outside the box. It's such a cliche, and you can't do it because you're in your own box.
Right.
And the only way to think outside the box is to have someone outside talk to you. So getting to start building those outside friendships, the people you don't work with, the people you don't necessarily always socialize with, they're not necessarily friends, but they're associates, colleagues, and you get to hear new ideas, you get to hear other experiences, and you get to, continue to see more of what's going on. It's one of the great things about these professional associations. You get to swap, your occasional war stories over a beer. You get to hear guest speakers talking about what's going on. I think we lined up a representative of the Department of Treasury to talk about some of what's going on in financial markets and how that impacts supply chains. I have this job because of one of our professional development meets indirectly. I never even knew that McKesson was a company. I didn't know they existed until we held a professional development meeting at the McKesson headquarters to talk about supply chain impacts on the medical field as a result of the tariffs in China back in 2018. Didn't know the company existed, so I couldn't apply to them.
If you're listening to this, that's $1 trillion advice, because I think what I've been touting since I first set foot in any association is it gives you an opportunity to gather market intelligence, actionable market intelligence, to do exactly what you've done very smartly. is connect the dots, see a big opportunity, and open up that door and jump through it. I love that. So if you're listening, hey, that's why you determine what you want to do, figure out what your passions are, and then kind of work backwards to figure out how to get there. But look at associations, because they can, if you use them and engage in them, just like Aaron, you can really it accrues to your benefit. All right. So much to talk about, so little time, Aaron. I know you've got a lot of passions and expertise and insights around the global supply chain world we're living in. You know, one of the recent live streams we talked about the noble mission we have as practitioners, you know, is the vaccine and more importantly, vaccine distribution. So tell us what you do now with McKesson.
McKesson is a medical supply company, for those who don't know. We provide medical supplies to clinics, to skilled nursing facilities, at-home patient care, a lot of the medical facilities. In fact, pretty much everything but hospitals. We don't prioritize hospitals as one of our main markets. We leave that to some of the other folks. But we've been doing it for well over 100 years. McKesson's a very old, long-time company. And my role is with the medical surgical team division, really. I'm a tiny part of a very big operations analysis department. I'm specifically tasked with analyzing warehouses and figuring out better slotting strategies. I am one of 2 slotting analysts that McKesson keeps on hand. I work with each of the distribution centers right now. Like, for example, I talked to our Dallas facility. They want to improve their pick-to-light. I start looking up numbers. I start figuring out strategies. I work with them hand in hand. What's your experience? Here's a thought. Does this work? We collaborate together to come up with how do we make it happen faster, better, smoother.
Fulfilling your passion, which is crunching numbers and giving folks data-driven advice, right?
Yep, it makes me very happy every day because people listen to me, for starters. That's nice. They actually take my advice seriously, but I also get to do things for them. It's like, hey, how would you like to be done earlier in the day? Because I can make it so you pick faster. Yeah, love it. Pickers generally like that.
One more question about the current role. When you hear the word slotting, for folks, veterans or non-veterans, or folks that may be listening that aren't familiar with warehouse operations, just define that real quick. What's slotting?
Obviously, warehouses hold a lot of stuff. In our computer-driven age, we like everything to be well labeled and organized and sorted. We don't just stack stuff up. We learned that probably pretty quickly when we started building warehouses. You don't just throw it all together. You put things in their specific place. And so everything's got a slot that it needs to live in. How we organize those slots, what lives where, how much to keep on hand, because we got to be concerned about those inventory carrying costs. Are we doing too many replenishments, not enough replenishments, tying up, labor hours? That's a lot of what I focus on, is how things fit into the giant puzzle that is the warehouse. Do we put it on shelf A, B, C, D? Do we put it at the front of the aisle, the middle, the back? How many different, aisles do we even need? I'm just a small part in that big process because there's a lot of other people figuring out bigger strategic goals. How much business do we want to move from this warehouse to that one? So I focus a lot on that kind of tactical application of how do we better organize and sort everything in the warehouse.
Well put. Think of the good old, when I hear of slotting, I think of the spaghetti diagram, tracking footsteps and motion, and how can we eliminate a lot of the wasted motions, right?
That's what it is.
Yeah, I love it.
It's part of that.
Aaron, I know that when you go broader with global supply chain, as we start to wrap up here, we'll make sure folks know how to connect with you. What's a topic or a trend or a development or an issue, challenge, you name it, that you're tracking more than others right now? What are you really diving in deep on that gets you passionate?
Honestly, I kind of just like listening a little bit about everything. I don't really have anything at this moment that's really got me because I'm kind of in the middle of my own work stuff. I'm middle of a big project I can't talk about. I've got so much going on with me that I honestly have just I just want to keep a pulse. What's going on out there? But really, when it comes to data and how do we use it better, I'm always fascinated by that. How do we make it more accessible? How do we do it smarter and better? Is the kind of things that really intrigue me.
If I can take the liberty of, by extension, it's how can we make accurate data, the actionable data, transparent data, but make it for the people that may not be data analysts. I'm not, I wasn't great at math and that's MAFF, by the way, Aaron. It just didn't come naturally for me. I wasn't cut out to be an engineer, or certainly not an advanced data finesser, if I'm a coin a word here, but really making it where in this information age, where all the data and ideally all the accurate, relevant data is at our fingertips, how can we make it easier for folks to consume it and make smarter and faster decisions with it, right?
That's perfect. That's a great analysis, Scott. It's because, we've got a lot of statistical illiteracy out there. You got to remember lies, damn lies, and statistics, and how we help people better understand it. How do we make it easier to understand? How do we get the right data? Because garbage in, garbage out. That's a big passion of mine, is just, getting those fundamentals, because often what we talk about when it comes to that global supply chain, a lot of it just boils down to just good basic fundamental principles.
One last thing I love that you kind of just exude through the interview is it's not crunching the data and all the numbers to say, I gotcha. It is the opposite. It's crunching all the information and saying, hey, here's how we can help. Hey, use this, and empowering others. And really, you didn't really use those words, but that's what I pick up on through the last hour spending time with you. And that's worth the price of admission. So thanks so much for that, Aaron. All right, so let's make sure, I imagine you'll have some folks that may want to compare notes or at least connect with you. What's the easiest way to connect with Aaron Freed?
Probably LinkedIn. Despite being all this computer data stuff, I don't do Twitter or anything like that. I ain't got time, but I can be reached on LinkedIn. My profile is Aaron, AARON Freed, FREED 42, because 42 is the answer.
Well, you know what? We're going to make it even easier. We're all about one click. We'll have a link to your LinkedIn profile so folks can make the connection and follow up with you. And really, really appreciate all of your time and what you do and how you view things, Aaron. It's enlightening. It's a breath of fresh air, especially from kind of your niche, so to speak, when it comes to data and information and leadership.
Appreciate it, Scott. Thanks for having me. I don't really feel like, all that important guy. I'm just a guy who does some work.
We need hundreds of thousands of folks just like that, guys and gals that just want to do the work. So really appreciate it. We've been talking with Aaron Freed, warehouse slotting analyst with McKesson and U.S. Army Reserve Logistics Officer. Aaron, thanks so much.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, so we're going to wrap up here. Hopefully our audience has enjoyed this as much as I have. Really enjoy Aaron's perspective. On behalf of the entire team here at Veteran Voices, hey, we invite you to find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. Find us too. We waste too much time around here, Aaron. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. But most importantly, because we want to hear from you. We want to amplify your voice. And if you're a veteran with a special story to tell or a story that you'd like to tell, reach out to us. We'll try to work you into our programming. Finally, Scott Luton wishing all of you nothing but the best. Hey, do good, give forward, and be the change that's needed. Be like Aaron. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Veteran Voices. Thanks, everybody.